So when I was asked to speak a little bit about Bob, I thought, well, I'm a jazz pianist. I know about Bob's career. I've been following it for years, and I can just wing this. And I thought 2 Grammy Awards, performances, recordings with all the very best jazz fusion artists of our time, including Ron Carter, Earl Klug, Randy Brecker, Chet Baker, Steve Gadd, Sarah Vaughan, among others. TV and film composer, the second most sampled artist in the history of hip-hop, and the list of his accomplishments goes on and on. Fortunately, I had the good sense to do some homework and discovered that there are many things I did not know about Bob and his body of work. I didn't know that he had played for tap dancing classes when he was 8, but was fired because he could not play loudly enough to be heard over the tapping. I also did not know that he had won several blue ribbons at the Missouri State Fair for his piano playing when he was in his early teens. And I'm kind of assuming the pianos were between the oxen pull and the cotton candy cart. Is that? Yeah, that's right. But what I did know was that he had recorded many albums, but several albums that were very important to me as a college jazz pianist and arranger, including Touchdown, whose personnel, including a big band, rhythm section, string section, contained all the most well-known studio and jazz players in the New York City scene at the time. As a budding arranger at the Eastman School of Music, this album blew my mind. As it happens, I was just over at my graphic designer boyfriend's house the other night talking about Bob and this particular album, and he ran over to his record collection, started rummaging around, and pulled it out. And he also pulled out a few others of Bob's from the 1980s. And what I've noticed is that this kind of event has repeated itself quite a bit over the last few weeks as I've been talking more about Bob and the fact that he would be here on campus. One of our drummers in my program, our jazz program, came up to me the other day and said that his dad isn't really a musician and doesn't know that much about music, but as soon as he heard that Bob was coming to campus, his face broke out into this huge smile and he said, "I love Bob James," which is wonderful. And as a jazz musician with a slight chip on my shoulder that our genre is not appreciated by a wide enough audience, it has been a revelation to find out just how beloved Bob is to such a wide variety of people. In digging more deeply into his music, I have come up with the following reasons for this. 1, he is a perfectionist and nothing is left to chance. Every aspect of the compositions, performances, and arrangements are crafted with the utmost care and integrity. 2, he only works with the very best players, engineers, and producers possible, and his production values are second to none. His music, and this is probably the most important to me personally, his music is charismatic and accessible without losing a shred of sophistication. I mention this particularly as there are these straight-ahead jazz artists and their aficionados who can sometimes become snobbish and talk about categories, and they can become snobbish in their tastes and look down their noses at music that has wide appeal. But every time I put on one of Bob's, quote, smooth jazz albums or other albums, I am constantly noticing the hip chord progressions, the slick arrangements, the fantastic rhythm section playing, and the wonderful improvising. As a chairman of the jazz department, I feel I should actually point out that while Bob's 2 degrees from the School of Music, Theater, and Dance are actually in composition, I suspect that he might have been a jazz major had the opportunity existed at the time. I should also add, though, that the influence of his composition studies can be heard in all of his original tunes and arrangements, regardless of genre, and is in his superb piano playing. Anyone fortunate enough to hear his arrangements of Nardis in Downtown last night know exactly what I'm talking about. I hold Bob up to our students as an example of someone who can do it all, and do it all at the highest possible level. I know I speak for our entire department when I say that we are absolutely thrilled that Bob is receiving this award, and that we hope he will consider himself an honorary alumni of our department as well, alumnus of our department as well. In closing, I would like to quote Bob's friend and bassist in his first Ann Arbor trio, Ron Brooks, who simply said, "Bob represents everything that is good, valuable, and meaningful about being a creative musician and artist. That bar is set high for those who will follow in his footsteps." It gives me great pleasure to introduce Bob James.
Thank you so much, Alan. You just ruined my composure. I had tried to calm myself down from the incredible enthusiasm and magic and wonderful feeling that I've had for the last 2 days, coming back here and realizing that I could celebrate a life in music that all came about because of University of Michigan. It forms every single note that I play. It formed my life with my wife, who I met at the Lydia Mendelssohn Theater during a production of Carousel when we were sophomores, and my dearest friend, best man at my wedding, who we also met at the same time and wrote the twist of the Michigan, the Michigan twist. That was our first original song we wrote together. And I'm not going to sing it. No way. It's just Michigan is our life. My entire family, my daughter Hillary, who's here, my granddaughter Ava's thinking about it already, and she's only 12 years old, and we're indoctrinating her. My wife's sister Linda and her husband Jerry and their family. We're all Michiganders. We're hooked. I wasn't born in Michigan. I was born in Missouri. Started looking for colleges to go to because I already knew I was going to be a musician, even though they fired me from the tap dancing. I was going to try to persevere. I guess I'm winning the. I wish I was winning the Emerging Artist Award. But it's kind of like the Perseverance Award. But anyway, what was I talking about? Yeah. I want to say, this is what I want to say, I don't have a speech. I want to say I love Michigan. I love the state of Michigan. We moved to New York as soon as we got out of college because that's what you had to do. To get into the theater, you had to be in New York. Certainly to be in jazz, you had to come to New York. That was the Mecca, the place where you had to prove yourself. And lived there for many years, but Judy and I kept drifting back. And we are now proud to say that we've suffered through our first full 12 months of Michigan weather, and we still love it. We live in Traverse City, and we love Michigan. And I just absolutely, everything that's the most important to me came out of those years. If I have anything to impart from that, it's been my life, is that I just want to share with the young people. I'm excited to learn about the way that when you're kind of catapulted out of this extreme, intense education that you get here, who knows what's going to happen to you, but you can't be better prepared than you're going to be in this place, this magic place. I need to thank Ross Lee Finney, Leslie Bassett, and Ava Coleman Case, who are my three main teachers that formed my basic education. Unfortunately, I think Ellen referred to it too, there wasn't much jazz in the University of Michigan legitimate world. So I had to learn a lot of my jazz education in bars and going into Detroit and hanging out with some of the musicians there and various things like that. So I'm so happy that things have changed drastically, and I love getting to know the jazz department here and play with three of the guys last night who inspired me so much to think that jazz now has a real solid part of the environment. It was only luck that I came to Michigan because I was born in Missouri, and I looked around for music colleges. University of Missouri, sorry to say, my father went there. It was a great law school, great journalism school, but music school at that time was kind of not happening. So I was listening to the music of Paul Hindemith at that time. So where can I find Paul Hindemith to study with? So I discovered Yale, but no undergraduate education there with Paul Hindemith, so I had to write that off. And I had heard something about bands. Michigan had a reputation for great bands. Why I cared about that, I don't even know. I weakly tried to play the trumpet a little bit. I never played the trombone or drums or anything else, but somehow or other the music reputation through the bands and through whatever it was started me looking around to come here, and I did, and there was no jazz, and I was very frustrated because even though my mother wanted me to be a classical musician and wanted me to practice more, I was a little bit of a rebel, and I will humbly admit that I left Michigan for one semester to go to what I perceive to be the great jazz school, Berkeley in Boston. And it has become a really great school, much different than what it was at that time. But it wasn't until I left Michigan that I realized how much I was missing by leaving it, and what a bad mistake that I had made by asking my parents to let me leave, and ended up begging them to let me come back. And it was that point when I met Jack and Judy, and boy, my life changed in a major, major way, and I got the well-rounded education of Michigan. Even though there wasn't a jazz department, I got the prestige, I got the immersion in the arts and in overall life learning that has, I think, held me in good stead. I have no regrets about spending my life in jazz. I have reached the point where it's so major to me to be having the opportunity to be recognized in this way. I want to thank everybody here. Thank you, Michigan. And I hope I can come back many times to try to pay you back for all the great things you did for me.
Well, congratulations and enjoy the evening. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you again next year. Thank you, folks.